Hello everyone and welcome on back to the channel. Are we ready for yet another double feature for today's episode? We have Engineer and Guardian, one of my most favorite classes and one of my least favorite classes. I almost slipped up and said my least favorite class, but I love everything at various degrees and that is okay. First up, let's talk about the Engineer because that was revealed first. Now, this one is an interesting weapon. I'm going to somewhat go through this one quickly because I just really want to talk about Guardian. But for engineers, they're getting short bow, and the short bow is looking to be a more hybrid weapon, perhaps combining a bit of condition damage and support as well. And the ways in which you sequence these abilities can determine which playstyle you kind of want to go into. So the short bow, the auto attack is a basic arrow, but comparing this weapon to another weapon that already exists, it's very similar to Necromancer's Staff in the regard that it appears all of your abilities are going to be area of effect location abilities that you can either allow to detonate on their own or manually detonate if you need to and if the situation presents itself. Interesting part about these detonations is it will then influence all of your other arrows that you have marked in certain locations, and it will grant certain effects based off of the one that you detonated. To us, as an example of how this works, let's take a look at the second skill in the set, Essence of Animated Sand. When it detonates, enchanted sand is spread over an area, immediately granting barrier to allies in the vicinity and crippling enemies. When detonating other arrows, it causes them to grant a small amount of barrier on initial detonation as well, regardless of their original effect. You could either layer all the arrows in a single spot to give out large amounts of barrier in a small area, or spread them out for maximum coverage, depending on the situation. Chain reaction effects are not limited to the initial detonation either. The fourth skill, Essence of Liquid Wrath, grants might to allies and vulnerability to enemies on detonation, then continues to pulse might to allies afterwards. Its bonus effect allows other arrows to also pulse might to allies in their effective radius, making stacking multiple arrows in the same spot an effective way to strengthen allies in a short period of time. So you have this idea of setting down these markers, shooting these arrows into these locations, and then deciding which one you want to detonate first, and then the other detonations will kind of loop into that as well. Now, I think we're going to have to see this more in gameplay to see how smoothly this will go in terms of if they will all then detonate, or you have to then cycle them again to see which one will get that previous effect, or if there's a way that they all detonate at the same time and they'll all share their effects. So it'll be interesting to see how this will feel in the flow of gameplay. Now, from a visual perspective, I love the arrows. They do feel very, very engineer. But when it comes to the detonation and the particle effects, they are pulling from the other professions, and that's kind of the lore, that's kind of the essence, for all intents and purposes, of this ability and of this weapon set, is that you're pulling from the other professions' magics. Now, there's a little, visually, it doesn't really have an identity. It doesn't really have a cohesive identity, which is maybe the point, but it's not my favorite in terms of the visuals. I do love the arrows. I like the markers. They look really cool. But the trailer was nice. You got to see all the abilities, and it wasn't cut awkwardly. I thought it was really good. It's kind of what the trailers have been. But yeah, that was Engineer. I like it. For what it is, I like it. It does feel a little Mark-ish. It does feel a little Staff Necro, which is not my favorite weapon out of the entire game. I find it to be a little boring, but this will have a little bit more complexity in terms of detonation. You can detonate them manually, and then it will impact your other detonations and influence those. So it is better. It is a better way of doing it. Now let's get into my favorite profession for Guild Wars 2. This is the Guardian. Under the blog post, armed with dual pistols, Guardians rain down bullets of justice. This is a condition weapon. Or two, because you're getting main hand and offhand weapon. Dual pistols. I mean, like, yeah, I see it. We did need a long-ranged condition weapon. It makes sense. But I also would not have minded ooh, why did my camera just decide to go dark? We're gonna get into it, but like the abilities, it's a ranged condition play style, which Guardian did need. But what was shown in the trailer really made me happy. Really made me happy. The new visuals. The thing that I've been searching for this entire time. Finally here. New visuals. So, let's get into the blog post. Right. First, let's look at the cornerstone of any weapon, the auto attack. The pistol's basic attack, Through the Heart, which is a very interesting name for a Guardian ability, fires a single, fast projectile that damages and inflicts bleeding on those struck. Notably, this projectile pierces through enemies, allowing up to multiple hits and positioning, all that stuff. But now, let's check out one of the more vital skills on the main hand pistol, Symbol of Ignition, positioned in the 3rd slot. This skill plants a symbol on the ground below you that damages enemies. Striking an enemy with this symbol, or firing a projectile through it, causes the symbol to also inflict burning when it pulses. In addition, firing projectiles through the symbol causes them to ignite, allowing them to inflict extra burning on the targets they hit in addition to their original effects. Let's talk about the final ability because it's going to kind of loop into all of this. As an example of how you might possibly use Symbol of Ignition, let's look at another skill on the offhand pistol, Hail of Justice. As you may have surmised from the name, this skill fires a volley of piercing projectiles at your targeted foe, each one inflicting bleeding and cripple on up to 5 enemies. Combining Hail of Justice and Symbol of Ignition allows you to apply a plethora of damaging conditions to your enemy in a short period of time. So it's about that combo. It's using the symbol as your centerpiece for all of the other abilities, because I'm imagining they're all going to be projectiles. You know, you're going to be able to stack up that bleeding and stack up that burning. I like it. However, I do want to talk about the Symbol of Ignition's functionality. This is shot at your location as a ranged weapon. And if you're going to be at ranged and you're wanting to stay at range, but you're fighting an enemy, you know, they're a distance away, the whole point of Symbol of Ignition is that when you fire things through it, the symbol itself will then pulse burning. You're not going to get that use if it's just being fired at your own position. I'd much rather this skill be something that you could ground target, like other abilities. What's the point of having a long-ranged or mid-ranged weapon if the whole big burst potential is you being in melee? Once again, you know, just making it a little inconsistent in terms of their range indicators and when things are going to properly shine. So that is a major criticism on my part, from what is shown, and that is very specific wording. So I'm inclined to believe that it's not a targeted symbol. But I do like everything else that was shown in terms of descriptors of the abilities. What I was extremely impressed with was this trailer, not only because it is cut and edited pretty well, but also because of the visuals. They just look so good. The actual smoke effect of when you fire the gun is nice, and it's a dark blue. It's very Guardian. It's not just black smoke. The projectiles themselves, I think we've seen on Guardians before. It's just like a trident maybe, but it looks really clean, almost like a Ray of Judgment, but maybe a bit more updated, a bit more rounded out in terms of not having those like 2D effects when you're looking at a projectile. But the main and piece de resistance for what was shown was this cool charging ability, which creates multiple spell circles and spell symbols in front of the gun, which is just so beautiful. And honestly, what I wanted kind of, you know, Mesmer to evoke as well. If you're going to be using a very mechanical weapon such as the pistol or a rifle on a magical class, lean into that magical element. And I'm very thankful that Guardian is doing it. I think it's really cool. And it creates this really large, like, bullet of fire that looks really nice. And I don't think Guardian has that spell effect, but it's really well done. Really, really well done. I wouldn't have minded if they also showed the symbol, because that seems to be a pretty big part and component of the this weapon set. But it's just like we're getting auto attacks, and then I think we are getting the Hail of Judgment. We're getting that rapid fire. I wouldn't mind if that maybe had more of like an arcing thing. It just looks a bit too auto attack-ish, and I think when you're incorporating things like quickness, it'll be a little bit difficult to differentiate. But we saw some pretty cool spell effects in this trailer, so I really like that. Guardian kind of ate, Guardian kind of served, and I'm really happy about that because I'm a Guardian main, but I'm a little partial. That was both the Engineer and the Guardian. Guardian has definitely been one of the blog posts that I've been most excited about and most pleased with. But Engineer was good. Engineer was good. It was solid. How are you all feeling about Engineer? How are y'all feeling about Guardian? It's cold and chilly, so I'm gonna put the hood back on. We're getting cozy lately. But yeah, if you are an Engineer main or you play more Engineer than I do, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, as I don't really have many stakes in this conversation or this game for Engineer. But it'll be nice to play and try. And as for Guardian, how are we feeling? Ranged, condition damage, bleeding and burning. Pretty solid. I think it'll be nice to have that with Axe, because you'll have that both distances of melee and ranged. If you have any thoughts, leave them down below. I will be looking, I will be commenting, I will be interacting. And comment, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. We have only one more weapon set to go, and that is Necromancer, Dual Sword Necro. Type in chat for Dual Sword Necro. And I'll see y'all later. Bye, everyone!